Okay, next week, let's move on, yeah? Next week, Poco a Poco San Pedro. I don't know who the presenter is. He's not here, is he? No? Okay. Well, someone will be presenting a talk on Poco a Poco San Pedro, which started in early 2016, with projects to help people in the San Pedro Itzican and the surrounding villages. They facilitate and support projects that are requested by the local community, and they leverage knowledge from available sources in the community, as well as from research, government, project leaders, and from around the lake. Now, Poco a Poco works on creating small startup projects to enable local people, mostly women, to earn a living and encourage and enable children to attend school. Now, one young lady has been trained as a paramedic and is now enrolled to take courses to become a doctor. Now, we believe she will be the first doctor to come from this village. The local people, especially the women, want to create local work and activities so they can earn money and be there to look after their children. Okay, so that's next week. Sounds great. Now, this week, what you've all come for. Niños Incapacitados, presented by Lydia. Oh, I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name. Bodin? Bodin, I'm sorry. Lydia Bodin. As I'm sure you all know, Niños Incapacitados is an all-volunteer, non-profit charity that has worked in the Lake Chapala area since 1974. Our mission is to help Mexican families who require financial assistance pay for the ongoing and or major medical expenses for their children. Now, Lydia has lived in Lakeside since 2018, and before coming to Lakeside from California, Lydia was Deputy District Attorney for the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office for 32 years. Wow. And she specialized in cases that involve child sexual assault, child physical assault, domestic violence, and crime victim services. And before practicing law, she worked as a teacher in the area of special education. Now, currently, Lydia is the president of the Programa Pro Niños Incapacitados del Lago, and assumed that position in 2019. So we'll hear all about this wonderful program. Give a warm welcome to Lydia Bodin.
I'm hoping this thing is on, and it is. I'm really happy to be here this morning. It's such a pleasure to be with, I think, kindred spirits on a Sunday morning. I want to acknowledge that a number of our board members are here today. I'm going to ask them to raise their hands. So if you're a member of our board, there's some there, some in the back. And the reason why is because, the reason why I bring them up is because at the end of this, if you have further questions or you want to know how we work, they would be more than happy to speak with you. We also have a table in the back, and if you want some written literature, we would be happy to provide that to you. As I walked out the door this morning, my husband, who's driving to Guadalajara right now to pick up our niece, said to me, "Don't forget that today you're a fisher of men and women," because the idea in mind for me is to get you interested in what we do. I think it's fair to say that we live in the most interesting of times. I think it might even be fair to say that we live in what could be considered a cursed time. But I'm of the opinion that it's a great time to be alive. And the reason I say that is because it's not really difficult to look around in our community, or really in any community anywhere, and see people in need. It's not hard here. All you have to do is look on the streets. You see children on the streets asking for things. I don't know how well aware you are of the social service system in Mexico, but if you come from a first world country, it's not the same here. And so there is a tremendous need, especially with children, and most particularly the need for food and the need, even more acutely, for quality medical care. So that is what we are about. You heard I heard the MC this morning tell you that we've been around since 1974. Well, that's a true statement. We've been around a long time. And we've been doing this work, as you can see, for 48 years now. We'll be on our 50th anniversary in a couple of years. In the late middle 90s, we became what's known as a civil association. And I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes because I do think that being a civil association is really, really important, particularly if you are dealing in charitable work. And our mission is to find children who are in need of medical care and to provide medical care that is life-saving and frankly for their parents is transformative. I want you to imagine for just a moment, and I'm sure many of you are parents, but imagine for a moment that you had an enormously sick child. You gave birth to a child that right from the get-go, from the beginning of that child's life, had tremendous medical need. And you were making 12,000 pesos, and I just want to emphasize that to you. You were making 12,000 pesos a month, and you couldn't afford medical care for that child. The desperation would be tremendous. I've never had to face anything like that. I've seen in my career as a deputy district attorney, I've seen children in tremendous need and their parents tremendously desperate to have the help that their child needs. But I've never seen anything like what we see on a daily basis here in our village. That's why I say it's a great time to be alive, because you have an opportunity to meet that need. Today, all right, you can do that. We serve children. Sorry, this flora and this fauna this summer, because we have had so much rain, is driving me crazy. So you'll see my nose running and all kinds of fun stuff. We serve children who qualify for our services. But the question probably for you is, well, how do children qualify? There's a number of ways. So number one, they have to qualify with what's known as a chronic illness. And that doesn't mean that, they have the flu or something and they come to us and we're doling out aspirin. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about very, very, very ill children who are coming to us. They start with us a lot of times at birth. They stay with us until they're 18, and we have had many children who have been with us their entire childhood. On a couple of occasions, and if a child is in great need, we will keep a child in our program until they are age 25. So we will stick with them. I also want you to know, and this is a little bit of a sad part of what we do, is not all the children that we serve survive. We do see a number of children who pass away, succumb to their illness. And in that instance, we do provide burial help. We give money so that children can die with dignity and that they can be buried in a way that honors both that child and their family. The types of diseases that we cover really run the gamut. We address a range of diseases ranging from neurological impairment. We have a lot of children here who are neurologically impaired. We're not really sure why, but that is something that turns up very frequently in the body of diseases that we deal with. With regard to that type of impairment in particular, it's expensive. So you have a child who has a neurological impairment. Frequently they have convulsions. That is an area where drugs, the cost of drugs to control that has gone up phenomenally. I don't have to tell you that that there's been a fair amount of inflation in the United States and Canada, wherever you're from. You know that things have gone up. In the area of drugs, we've seen a tremendous increase, sometimes up to 25% increase in the amount of the cost of those drugs. And neurological impairment in particular is very expensive. The next kind of very expensive ticket item for us with our children are cancers. And we have children who, all kinds of cancers. I'm going to talk a little bit in a little while about some of the children that we've helped and the diseases that they've suffered from. You'll get a better flavor of what we see. We see a lot of children with epilepsy. And I'm going to pull that out of sort of the neurological impairment box, because epilepsy a lot of times comes because of birth trauma. And so you'll see children with epilepsy and cerebral palsy because of the manner in which they are born. And we see a great deal of that too. We also see children with a large number of physical impairments. It can be orthopedic, usually orthopedic that requires a great deal of surgery. And it's not, frequently the children that we see, it's not just a single surgery. There is just a long line of surgeries. We see children with cleft palates. That in particular is something that requires frequently up to 5 to 7 surgeries to get that child to adulthood. So the diseases that we deal with are both serious and chronic. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about some of the children that we have helped in the last couple of years, because I think in speaking about those children, you can get a really good sense of what we're dealing with. So I want to start my story with Sebastian. Sebastian was an enormously adorable little boy, the sweetest little thing. He had the sweetest smiles, but when he was born, he had a seriously misshapen head. So much so that over time, it would have actually impaired his brain function. And so his parents brought Sebastian to us, and we partnered with Shriners. I think, it wasn't Shriners. Okay, I'm looking, the person I'm shaking her head going like this to me is Nicole Sargent, and she is our clinic director. And I don't know why she calls what she does retirement, because it's not retirement. Nicole has a full-time 24/7 job. And I'll talk a little bit about how we deal with our parents in a little bit. So we had Sebastian come in. We had to send him to Mexico City to have his head operated on, and he had a helmet that he wore. And today he is a fully functional little 2-year-old. He's adorable. You'd never know right now that he has a problem. He is a child. He's a good success story. He's graduated out of our program, and he's just darling. Now I want to talk about another, what I consider a success story, because success is always in the definition. How many of you read the LCS Conexiones magazine this month? Did you see it? Okay, there was Dave from our board side. Well, there's if you get a chance to take a look at it, because there's a picture of this really pretty little girl with these beautiful eyes, these beautiful wide eyes, and her name is Valeria. When Valeria was born, she suffered profound neurological impairment. She couldn't walk, she couldn't speak when it came time to do that. She was incredibly impaired. Valeria came into our program, and she has been going to a series of therapies. She goes to another social service agency called Teletone, which I'll talk about in just a moment, which is not a government agency, it's a nonprofit that works on the north side of Guadalajara, and she has gone through, how old is she now? 7, 8? 7. So she's been with us for a good long time. And for a child who, without intervention, really essentially would have been laying in a bed the rest of her life, she's now up and running, literally. She is beginning to talk in a minor way. I suppose there are people that would look at a child who is that profoundly disabled and would say that that is not a success story. That is a success story. If you go on our website, and we do have one, if you go back there, you can get our URL off of our written material. You will see we have a video of Valeria and what she has accomplished. We have a video of the first time she stood up and really walked. She was so excited to stand up and walk. She was clapping her hands for herself. It was, to me, that's success. That is success. I want to talk a little bit about childhood cancers. We see that come up quite a bit. There's a little girl that we have in our program who came to us, and she had a sarcoma in her arm, and sadly, at a very young age, very young, 4 or 5 years old, she had a sarcoma removed from her arm. And bluntly, her chances of survival of sarcoma, which in childhood is very difficult. We do not think at this point that she's going to have too many years on the face of this earth. But that's another success story. Why? Because we can help her. We can make her more comfortable. Her parents know that in her suffering there is a way to alleviate some of that suffering. That is goodness in action, that we can do that, and her parents have someone who understands what she's going through, and we can help her, and we can send her to the right people and make sure that although she may not live to adulthood, we can surely help her in her time of need. We have another little boy, and this is a great story, who came into our program with a very serious cleft palate. You know, there are ranges of cleft palate, and sometimes it just looks like the lip is cut, but more frequently, what happens is the cleft actually goes back almost to the child's throat. That is very serious, because a child could literally starve to death because they're not able to eat. And so this child came into our program. We knew that what this child was looking at was a long series, and we are estimating at this point, I think he's about 2 right now. His name is Julian. We know that that's going to be a long series of surgeries, and we also know that the cost of those surgeries is tremendous. This is a time when we see something like that where we start to partner with people in our community. Listen to our partnership on this one. It's a good tale, and it has ended up very well. The owner of El Barco, Carlos, actually a number of years ago supported a young woman out of our community to attend medical school. She's a local young woman, and she attended medical school, and at the time that this child came into our lives, Diana, which is her name, Dr. Diana, was graduating from the University of Guadalajara, graduating from the medical school, and she was doing her time of service in public hospital, because you know in Mexico if you go to medical school you have to perform service for a period of time. So she was in her service period. Her specialty was pediatric surgery, and so we had told Carlos from El Barco, we had told him about this problem, and frankly we were looking for supporters in the community to pay for this surgery. Or help us with that surgery. He said, oh, I know. I'm going to talk to Dr. Diana because she's become a pediatric surgeon. Well, that's what happened. So we had, talk about coming full circle. Here's a man in our community supporting a young woman going to Mexico, going to medical school. I love that story because it helped somebody in our community. It lifted women. And the fact that he helped someone in our community, he lifted a woman, made it possible for us to lift up this child. And so this child, we had a picture of this child that was difficult to look at. If I had a PowerPoint here today, I would show a picture of him because now he's a happy, smiling boy, and he's beautiful. He was beautiful before, he's beautiful now. So that's what one person started putting Dr. Diana through medical school. He had no idea that 4 or 5 years later that we were going to be able to help Julian, but that's what happened. And that's like, you know what they say, poco a poco. It's hand to hand, hand to hand. That's what happened in this story. I want to talk a little bit about children who go deaf too. That's another sort of big issue here. We are able to help children who are deaf in our community, not just by giving them a hearing aid, because sometimes a hearing aid isn't enough, particularly when there is neurological impairment associated with deafness. What we have to do is we have to assist children getting cochlear implants. And we have assisted a number of children with cochlear implants in our community. Now, here's a really interesting story. We had a child come into our program who is the brother of the child. Well, we helped the brother with their medical issue. But then we had this other child who had a hearing problem, but it was clear that he, even at a young age, was extremely intelligent, but was deaf. So this child was taken to Teletone, which is a large agency that provides medical services, physical therapy, occupational therapy, living skills to handicapped children, disabled children in our community and all over Guadalajara. Okay, and so they could see that this child was clearly very bright. Well, it turns out he tested out with an IQ of 130. All right. But he couldn't hear anything. So we had the opportunity not only to help the younger brother, but to help the older brother with a cochlear implant. Cochlear implants are very, very expensive. They're about, in American dollars, roughly $30,000. We will pull, and I'll talk about this a little bit, we will pull from a variety of services to help us. And I'm going to talk about what our various partnerships are in our community. So those are some of the things that we have been able to do. And I have to tell you, I have the privilege, really, and the opportunity of working in the clinics, and I'll talk about those in a minute too. The clinics that we hold in Jocotepec and Chapala, I have the opportunity of doing that. And I have the opportunity twice a month to go into those clinics and look at this success. And to see this. And if you want your heart to be warmed, if you want to feel like your life is worth it, you're doing something that's really going to make a difference, all you have to do is come to one of those clinics. And if you want to come, I'll be glad to talk to you after. Let me talk a little bit about our partnerships. So the question is really, how do we work? How do we do this? Well, one of the places that we start is with local partners. So Carlos in El Barco, go have a drink there, by the way. Whoops, well. Yep, still on. Go there and thank him for what he's done, because he's a great local partner for us. Great local partner. We have Dr. Hector Ladrone provides us with help. We have on occasion needed beds for children in their homes. A good hospital bed, just to help make that child comfortable and get them through whatever illness they're in. Dr. Ladrone has helped us with that. And I just want to acknowledge these members of our community because they have done incredible things. Tulsa Laboratories and a number of laboratories in this area have given us cost breaks on the cost of doing medical testing, blood tests, that kind of thing. Let's talk about Dermica for a moment. I'm not going to say whether I go there or not for Botox. I might. I'm not. I, of course, don't need it. But they do a lot of work for us, and they don't charge us for that work. With children, because we have children, not only are they ill, but a lot of our kids with illnesses, they're taking medicines that give them really dermatitis, really kind of dermatitis from hell. They have skin problems, and they help us with that. Okay, so those are helpers in our community. You might also be wondering, how do kids get to us? How do we find them? I mean, we're not doing advertising or anything like that. So this is how we get children, and this is probably our most important partnership. Our most important partnership is with an organization called DEEF. Does anybody here know what DEEF is? Okay, that's basically the Mexican Social Service Agency. Desarrollo Integral de Familia. They serve not only children, they serve the elderly, they serve families. So we have partnered with them. And so what they do is they send us children who have medical need. It's very important for us to have that relationship with them because they see children all day long. Okay? And they will vet these children for us so that we know, number one, and that frankly, it's a good fraud prevention for us. We know that the children and the families who are coming into us are legitimate and that they really need help. And they enhance our work and we enhance their work. We have, in the last year, we have started taking children who have come into the foster care. There is a foster care system in Mexico. We've taken children who are wards of the court who need medical care. We have the great privilege of helping children, not only who are ill, but children who have lost their families, which is unquestionably the most profound loss that any child could ever serve. The least we could give them is good medical care. The other way that we receive children into our program is through local doctors. So we have local doctors who are keeping an eye out for us. If they see a child, they will refer to us. And then, on occasion, community members will throw a child our way and make sure that a child is getting cared for. The other thing that we do now, so we do an intake process. They have to qualify with their illness, so we have to have a child who's seriously and chronically ill. They have to financially qualify. That can be tricky. And we try to help as many as we can. You can't, so you know, we don't have like a $5,000 or 5,000 peso a month cutoff or something like that. We look at the whole family. If they've got a lot of children, if only one parent is working, how serious is the disease? Because I'm going to tell you, we have parents where both parents are working so hard, but the medical cost for their child is more than what they are making in a month. So we're careful about how we financially vet. Now the question is, I think next, the logical question is, well, how do we work? So children come into our program. We do a pretty rigorous intake with DEEF. We ask them questions. I should tell you also, and just so you know, we are very cognizant of the privacy of our children. For example, I would never give you a child's last name. We don't show pictures much of our children unless we occasionally get permission from them. We keep all medical information private. We are very cognizant of privacy protection for our children. Every time a child comes in, their parent knows exactly what we're going to do with their information. We have to be able, of course, to talk to doctors and that kind of thing. So we do get some waivers from parents, but we're very careful with medical information. We actually have quite a treasure trove of information, and we guard it very, very carefully. So the way that we work is, first of all, at the basis level, we have to recruit volunteers who can work in our clinics. I will say the clinic work is not for everybody. I do tell people the first time that they go is prepare for your heart to crack just a little bit. It is hard to look at this because when you go there, you are looking at a mother and a child who are very much burdened. The child is very ill. The parents are desperate. We have parents break down in front of us all the time out of worry, out of need for money. How are they going to provide for their children? So that can be a little bit hard. When you are dealing directly with parents, we do have the need for people who work in our clinics to be bilingual. And so most of the people who work in the clinics are bilingual. I am like semi-bilingual. And I can tell you, I work in the clinic, but what I do is I do the paperwork in the clinic. So if you're not bilingual and you want to work in the clinic, we still have a place for you. Because when we're working in the clinics, and I'll explain how that clinic works in a minute, we're writing checks to parents, okay? We're writing checks, we're tabulating up bills. You don't have to speak Spanish to be able to sit and tabulate up bills, okay? You can do that. So if you're interested in working in the clinics, we would be more than happy to consider you for that work. We also understand that that's not everybody's cup of tea. We have other ways that you can work in our organization, which I will talk about in a minute. This is how we do it. When a child has medical expenses, the parents pay for that, and then what we do is we reimburse them. We're kind of like a little insurance agency. The child qualifies, and then they bring all their facturas, which in Mexico is a legal receipt. All right, we add that up and we write a check to the parents. On occasion, when expenses exceed 2,000 pesos a month, then what we do is we pay the medical provider directly by way of bank transfer. These are medical providers that we know, that we are in touch with, and we're reassured that they are doing the right thing. So that's another way that we pay our parents. And we operate in Jocotepec. And Chapala, that is where we hold our clinics. We also now are beginning outreach over into San Pedro. I believe we have about 15 kids now. She's shaking her head. I have to look at her to get my right answer. We have about 15 kids over in San Pedro. We are looking to expand our work, but we can only expand our work under 2 conditions. Number 1, we have enough people to do the work, and number 2, we have enough money to do our work. Money is on my mind every day. It is the first thing that I do in the morning as I think about making money for my organization. I think about the life-saving work that we are doing. So, and the need is constant. It doesn't go away. Just because it's Christmas Day or there's a pandemic, that didn't change the need, okay? It changed how we worked, but it didn't change the need. The average child in our program, I have to retabulate this every once in a while right now because costs are going up, and so I have to, kind of watch that. But right now it's about 27,000 pesos a year for the average child. Now, there's no such thing as a fictional average child. We have kids that, maybe 1,000 pesos a year, and then we have children who are very, very ill, and it's much more expensive. I'm just giving you an average of what we're looking at. Right now, we have about, I think, 132 in our program right now. When the pandemic hit, we had about 168 kids in our program. The pandemic changed our whole program because we were meeting with parents a couple of times a month. Well, when the pandemic hit, and where we meet with the parents, by the way, we meet in Deep. That's where we meet with them, where we hold our clinics. But when the pandemic hit, Deep shut down. Okay, so then what are we to do? Well, what we started doing was we organized, and I love this part of what we do, we organized the mothers in the communities where we lived. Just because we couldn't get to them didn't mean we couldn't do our work. So what we did was we had our mothers collect the facturas for us, and we have now hired mothers to work for us because we're lifted up and we're going to lift up our community. So another way that we lift up our community is we hire the mothers to do essentially paperwork for us. I'll tell you what else we do because we write checks, and this is an interesting sort of side benefit. Most people who live in our community don't use banks. Mexico's very, as they say in the business, underbanked. But when we wrote checks to our mothers to go and cash those checks, now all of a sudden they're starting to have relationships with banks. So we're hiring moms. We're writing checks for medical care. We're giving them money for working to us. So we're working on everybody. We float their boat, they float ours, everybody's rising. And that's where we want to be. We meet with these parents. When we in these clinics, we talk to them about the needs of their child. That's when we really sit down with them one-to-one. By the way, in June we went back to the clinics. We are back now meeting one-to-one with our parents. So it's really important to us to be able to do that. And the reason why we do that is because we can look them in the eye. We can medically plan. They can tell us when their child has surgeries coming up. So we medically plan with them in those clinics, and we reimburse them for costs. The other way that we stay in touch with them is we use WhatsApp, and we have these large groups of mothers and the heads of our clinics, and we stay in touch so they know what we're doing. We are in touch with them via WhatsApp. Okay, so that's how we stay in touch. We stay in touch personally. We stay in touch by way of phone. We are talking to them all the time. They know that they can call us day or night, and I want to tell you that they do call us day or night. A lot at night. A lot. But as I said, illness doesn't take a holiday. So we have to be there for them to answer their questions. Now the next question is, I think, so we're doing the work, right? We're doing the work. I think I pretty much established that it's expensive to do this work. So the question is, how do we sustain ourselves? I gotta kind of watch myself on the time. How do we, got it. And I'm gonna beat your 10 minutes. The question is, how do we sustain ourselves? So the first obvious way that we sustain ourselves is through donations. Donations actually are the major portion of how we make money. I think a lot of times people think charities hold events and that's how they make all their money. For us, that is not true. We have a very dedicated supporter base. It's pretty international. Canada, the United States, Mexico. We really do reach out because we want to make sure that we have a consistent base of support so that then we know that we have money coming in, because as I told you, we start with these kids at birth, they stay with us until 18. That's our commitment to them. So we have a pretty strong donor base. The other way that we support ourselves, and we have been extremely fortunate in the last couple of years, we accept legacy gifts. So when people die, they leave us money. And that has really been, in the last couple of years, a godsend, really. And then the last way we do it is through events. You may be familiar with our gala, that we haven't done it for the last couple of years due to the pandemic. But that's another way that we raise money, is through events. So those are the three major ways that we raise money. The other way that we sustain ourselves is through the recruitment of volunteers. And I'm not even going to be subtle about it. If you want to volunteer, I'm here to talk. I'll talk to you today. Okay. We do need volunteers. We need boots on the ground. You can volunteer at a clinic. You can volunteer to work at a bank. You can work on our highly developed IT system. We have a highly developed IT system. We need people. Yes, I'm looking at you. We have a lot of kids that we need to keep track of, all right? And so it doesn't sound enormously glamorous to be an IT person, but I'm willing to say that it's probably one of the most important parts of our organization. And the third way to help us, are you interested in being on our board? We have a great board. We really do. And we are multinational. We have Americans, Canadians, Mexicans, Argentinians, Colombians. We've got all kinds of stuff on our board. Okay, and we have people who are in their past professional lives who are enormously talented individuals. We have an economist sitting there who is our treasurer. We have a titan of industry in pharmacy. Nicole was an executive for Canada Air, and that brings to us a wealth of organizational experience, because we are dealing with a lot of information. We are dealing with a lot of kids. We need IT help, and we need it. And in events, if that's what you want to do, and you want to work an event, we're happy to put you to work. Finally, if you just want to pick up your pen and write a check, that's another way of giving, and that's a fine way to give. If you can't do any of the other ones, that's a fine way to do it. I want to talk a little bit about our administrative status and who we are. We're what's known as a civil association. A civil association is a charity, a nonprofit organization. You would think of it as a nonprofit. We're a nonprofit who is registered with the government. That means we have to write reports to the government more than a couple of times a year. We report to Hacienda, which is a kind of tracks what social service agencies are doing. They track our donations. They track how many kids we're taking care of. But the trade-off for that, if we do that, is we have a very high status in the world of charities in Mexico, where it's known as a donataria. That's an important status. And the reason why that's important is because if a Mexican person wants to give us money, we can give them a tax receipt. If you are an American and you want to give us money, there is a 501c3 that is essentially a tax broker. In the Lakeside area, they are known as the Lakeside Foundation, the Foundation for Lakeside Charities. And then there's a third organization that we are involved with who can write a tax receipt. They're known as Amistad Canada. The Canada Tax IRS is known as Canada Revenue Agency. And it allows citizens of those countries to give money to our organization, and at the same time they can get a tax receipt. The other thing that having those statuses do, because they just don't do that, they audit you too. So we get audited by the government. We're audited by Amistad Canada. We're audited by Foundation for Lakeside Charities. I know kind of in the natural, we ought to be a little bit Most people aren't comfortable with audits. I say bring it on. Because we know, and you know when people do that we're honest and we're doing what we should do with our money. I want to tell you that 95% of the money that is given to us, or any money that we take in, goes straight into what we do. 4 to 5%, we do have to have an accountant, we do have to have banks, and we do have administrative overhead. Okay, so most of the money, a goodly share, goes to the children that we serve. Like I said, it's a great time to be alive. It really is, because we can see the need in front of us, and each of us has this precious life that's been given to us. The question really is, how are you going to spend your life? And I got to tell you, for as long as I have breath left in me, I choose service. I choose service. I hope you do too. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was excellent. And thank you to the board and all volunteers and Niños Incapacitados. We do have time for some questions, and we can't hand out a microphone. So if you have a question for Lydia, raise your hand. Well, if you think you can shout it out so Lydia can hear it, she can repeat it through the microphone so the people at the back can hear it. Or I will, yeah.
Okay. Do you write, have you gotten any grants? Have you got a grant writer or somebody that can help you write grants?
Yeah, we have. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. No.
I can talk loudly. Let me tell you. Before I was a lawyer, which is what I used to do, I was a school teacher, and I'm using my playground voice right now. I was also a trial attorney, so you learn to talk loud and talk a lot. The answer is yes, we do make applications for grants. They are very, very hard to get. We have not been successful. We do have a grant writer, but that's me, because I did that in my prior life when I did victim services. In Los Angeles, we got all kinds of grants. I agree with you that we should do that. We try to do it. It's a really competitive field, and there's not a lot of them. Yes?
You mentioned giving money to the Lakeside Family Charities or whatever.
Yes.
Can you earmark the money you give to the foundation, to your group, or does it go to just the foundation?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I should have made that clear. When you go into the foundation, you can go on their website. They have essentially a menu of charities that you select. So the answer is yes, you can earmark it. Great question, really good.
It's also on our website too.
Yes. You can give on our website. There's a lot of ways to give. Yes.
Okay, are you aware that the federal government has a lot of social benefits? For example, handicapped people, they get some financial assistance. And do you have a program to enroll them into that, into the social benefits?
No, actually, I'm going to let our clinic manager actually answer this, because there are certain requirements. I didn't mention them. Why don't you tell them about what we require when they enroll?
So what was your question, sorry?
Okay, do you
Can
have
she
a
have the
program?
microphone?
No, I can talk loud too.
Okay. I haven't heard you
I
yet.
used to teach.
Do you have in your program, it's a great program, but a program to help locals or Mexican citizens, handicapped people, to enroll them into the Mexican social benefit?
Okay, so we only deal with children.
Even children,
Only deal
even
with
if
children.
they're handicapped?
Let her tell you.
Okay, so we have a lot of handicapped children, but we work through DIF. So DIF as program that sometimes they will, yes, right now there is a program through my mother's about wheelchairs. So yes, we do work with them.
Okay.
So
because-
DEEP enrolls them into the social service system.
Yeah.
But that does not cover a lot.
But they don't cover medical
I know,
costs.
I know it
Doesn't
doesn't,
cover
but
all.
at least it's a little draft.
Yes.
That it will be until they die.
Right, yes, we do that.
Okay, because I got involved with a Indian lady in here because I was saw in Facebook, help them, donation, donation, donation. And I asked, why don't you help her to get into the federal pension? which every Mexican after 65, whether you're rich or poor or whatever, we got a benefit every 2 months, okay? It has taken me months, but we're getting closer to that. So it is possible.
Yes, and we do, our children do benefit from whatever is offered, yes.
Okay.
And we work with local government. Every time we have a new.
I went to the federal government.
Okay, well, let's let other people, if they have a question. Do I have, yes, ma'am, and then I'll get you.
Do you have an office around here? I'm not a local person.
Yeah, we have an office actually in Chapala. I have to tell you, we don't have enough money to staff that office, but we have to have a legal address. Part of having status with the government, that status that I talked about, you have to have a physical address, we do, and we have a phone number. What I would suggest you do though, if you want the quickest amount of service, I would suggest going on our website and just dialing one of the board members. Okay, yes ma'am.
Do you work with Doctors Without Borders?
We do not. We have never worked with them. I'm aware of them, but we just haven't worked with them. And we don't even know if they're in this area. I'm not aware of them, but we don't. Yes.
Do you have nurses that work for you?
No, we do not employ medical personnel. We have people on our board and other people who work with us that have medical experience, but what we're doing, remember, we reimburse. But I will tell you that we work really hard to stay in touch with the medical community in our local area, largely because we sometimes need to know where to send parents to.
So the clinics that you run, who gives the care?
Care isn't given, only money is given in the
I know
clinic.
it's not a-
We
I thought it was
I know
like
clinic is a bit of a
medical.
misnomer,
I thought-
but what we do, it allows us to do a couple of things. First of all, a clinic allows us to reimburse parents for the money that they've spent.
Right.
And if they don't have any money to spend, we have other ways of handling that. But the other thing it allows us to do is to see our parents, talk to them. You know, these parents, I don't know how many of you have ever done respite care or anything like that. They need somebody to talk to, and we are that ear for them. We're going to see.
Such a great job and what a great cause. May I ask you how you got into this one and why here?
Oh, okay, I'm talking for me, I mean, every board member has a story. My husband was born in San Nicolas Ibarra. He came to the United States and went to school and ended up being an aerospace engineer for Boeing. And we got married, and we decided at some point, after a very long period of working, we decided we wanted to retire, and we decided we wanted to retire here. And that was for a couple of reasons. The first reason is we just love it here. And my husband spent all that time in the States with me. It was my turn to live with him here. And so we came here. We have lots of family here. They're all over the place. But the other reason that we came here was to serve. And that was on our mind. My husband had great opportunity. You know, San Nicolas Ibarra, when he left there, was very small. It was just a little rancho when he left there, 50 years ago. He wanted to go there and work. We were fortunate that some really good friends of ours introduced us to Larry Wynett, who's sitting right there, and Jesse, and he was involved with Niños, Incapacitados, and people really chatted up the work that they were doing. I've always been interested in working with children. My husband's always been interested in working with children. He worked STEM classes, STEM, like all the engineering stuff and math and everything, all that stuff that I don't like. I'm right brain, he's left brain. We came here with that idea in mind, and so for us this has been perfect in terms of giving us an ability to serve. I would say that if you asked most of our board members, what they would say is that I have a heart for children, I have a heart for the community. I want to find a way to make that real. This is a way to make that real.
Any other questions for Lydia?
Very nice.
Thank you.